Go.Compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. At Go.Compare, we are pleased to be partnering with the Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign, recognising the individuals who are going the extra mile at grassroots rugby clubs across Great Britain. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to nominate a grassroots hero who could win £5,000 for their club, as well as hints and tips from our insurance experts at Go.Compare.
Right, that's it, everybody. We've made it. It's the end of the autumn. Wait, what do you mean Ireland are playing Australia on Saturday in the only test of the weekend? In another example of rugby's totally normal scheduling. Okay, so there's one more game to go. But anyway, you're back with the Telegraph Rugby Podcast, our final episode of the autumn. Save your tears. We've had a lovely time. And I promise we will be back in the Six Nations as well. You're here once again with myself, Ben Coles, with Charlie Morgan.
Colesy.
With Charles Richardson.
Looks like we made it. Look how far we've come, my baby.
So we're running on fumes. We're going to give you everything.
I was going to do that gag, but we did that last time.
We did. Yeah, I know. Do you know any more Shania Twain-based conciliatory?
It's not Shania Twain.
Yeah.
Looks like we made it.
Looks like we made it. Look how far we've come, my baby, is the opening lines to You're Still the One by Shania Twain off her famous Come On Over album.
I was thinking of another song. But thank you for that, Charles.
Yep.
And Charles, are you okay? I know you had a very busy day yesterday. So.
An extremely busy day yesterday. Travel chaos from Stormbert. I was at Murrayfield. It seems like about 10 years ago that I was at Murrayfield, but I was at Murrayfield yesterday. I got back to my flat last night at 2:00 in the morning, and here we are now. After delayed flights, Gatwick cab chaos, I met a lovely couple who were also at the game on my flight back from EasyJet yesterday, so a shout out to them. I hope they made it home back to Clapham Junction safely.
Doesn't he look fresh, Charlie?
He does.
I sound it as well, no doubt.
Haunted. Doesn't
he look ready to recap the autumn? Charlie, where were you?
I was only at Twickenham, so fairly easy for me, and I watched Wales versus South Africa on the telly the day before, live blogging it. So no real excuse for me being totally almost as broken as Charles. But hey, it's been a grind, but we're here.
You saying that you blogged that game made me remember that I actually blogged Friday night's game, and I'd forgotten between France and Argentina.
There we go.
So, and then I was in Cardiff, a bit like you, going to Scotland, very wet, very wild, not the easiest of trips. And then Twickenham yesterday for an England-Japan game, which we'll get into, but I already don't remember a lot about because it was such one-way traffic.
It was an open training session, really.
An open training session is a very good way to sum it up. Can I please have your highlights from the weekend? Charles, was it your air travel or was there something else?
Air travel, definitely the low light. I loved Italy v New Zealand on Saturday night, it's particularly Tommaso Menoncello's performance, and I was very pleased that he managed to get a try because I thought, despite the result, he was probably the best player on the pitch out of the 30 there, and he looked a class above, and so I was glad when he scored. Italy couldn't quite get there. I saw a great tweet. I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, and so I'm not able to give you credit, but basically saying that Italy did all the difficult things well and all the easy things terribly, which actually summed it up really nicely.
Yeah, that's quite good. Charlie, what's your highlight?
I can have two because I was such a shambles in this section last week. Louis BRA, sorry, Charles. He scored a fantastic solo try, chasing his own grubber. But in the first half, I think it was Fiku put in a grubber down the line for him to chase. And the noise just make kick pressure sexy again. Let's do it. And then the second
Get some
one,
hats.
And then the second one was Asher Poku-Fajor coming on for his debut, the restart immediately going out on the full, so he had a scrum, and just his excitement, swagger over to this first scrum of his Test career, what we anticipate will be a long, exciting Test career, was really cool with all of his teammates geeing him up. Just really nice little moment.
I nearly lost it there because you practiced BLBRA's name so often before we started recording, and then couldn't deliver.
That's where we are.
What's difficult about the word Ray?
Ray. The word Ray.
Yeah. Stingray.
Yeah. It muddles him. He can't do it. I will go with Sione Tuipulotu's grandmother being at the game at Murrayfield, which was because we get a lot of sponsored videos during these kind of events, which are kind of, they try hard, but they don't really cut through. And the whole Skyscanner flying Tuipulotu's grandmother over from Australia to see him play for the first time, him not knowing about it, thinking he was meeting a fan in the changing room, and then getting reunited with her, and then he scored the first try, didn't he, on Sunday, Charles? And they cut to the crowd, and she was there celebrating in the stands. I was like, yeah, that's.
If you haven't seen that video, get on it. It's great.
1,000,000%.
But she also gave him the trophy at the end.
I mean,
she presented her grandson with the Hopetoun Cup, which is the cup between Scotland and Australia. And then afterwards, Tuipulotu said that as his grandmother gave him the trophy, she whispered in his ear and said, "We got him."
that is unbelievable.
That's cool.
You can hear the Skyscanner PR team just popping champagne on a Monday morning, thinking that's a job.
Will she be allowed back to Australia? Is the question. We'll see.
Oh, don't give it a
horrible twist.
Don't give it a negative finish.
She will be. She will be.
How do you know?
Well, I'm hoping now. I'm touching wood here.
Right, let's move swiftly on. England against Japan. Let's have a chat about that. Okay, England 59, Japan 14. 9 tries, Charlie.
Yeah.
A win for England to end what's been a difficult month. How much can we really take from that game? Very
little. I think a lot of what came off for England was what they had been striving towards for the previous games in the autumn. So in that respect, I guess we got a little bit of clarity on how they want to play. They want their line out to be a weapon. They went to their more and got more success. I think they did try that against bigger teams. They just met more resistance, and they actually tried a lot of the very same strike moves. The strike move that they scored the first try through when Marcus Smith puts Ollie Lawrence through a hole on the second wave, and Ben Earl, having been the initial decoy runner, links up to score. That's the exact move that they play at the death against Australia, and it goes wrong, and Andrew Callaway scores. So. They are trying to do the right things, and you could say that this was just the result of better cohesion, because Steve Borthwick has stuck with a lot of familiar combinations when a lot of people wanted him to change things up. But also you could just say that there was less resistance, and therefore it's going to be trickier to do this and play like this during the Six Nations. So it's hard. I mean, it's England's year in a nutshell, right? It's how much can we actually figure out about this team? Where actually are they? They're probably stranded a little bit below the best teams in the world, and looking upwards and staying competitive in those games against those elite sides, while also being, having the tools to put away lesser teams.
There was an element of kind of bullying a team below them and not being able to get it done against the best teams, wasn't there? And while it seemed as though everybody had a great day out, which is important, and given it was lashing down with rain, everybody in the crowd seemed to have a good time, and they were entertained, and that's nice, that's good. The game needs that. But at the same time, Charles, we were left almost, because of the standard of the opposition, you're left sort of picking at details, aren't you, and looking at things that went wrong. One of those being a couple of defensive lapses with the blitz, which sorry, they don't call it a blitz, do they? Well, they don't call it. No, they call it as the hammer. Marcus Smith revealed after, and he said it's very hard to train against, and he said it's very hard to go up against the hammer in training. So that's clearly what they want it to be referred as. What do you make of those kind of errors, Charles, and what does that say about where they are?
Well, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do in that first Six Nations match against Ireland in Dublin. If they surely, having brought this, well, let's call it the hammer defence this far, they have to double down with it. Surely, that if they were to bin it off entirely now, then that would just, I think it would send the wrong message and be a complete waste of all. But then also it isn't working that well, so it's a little bit, they're in a little bit of a rock and a hard place with it. I think maybe it's just one of those things whereby with a new, we can say what we like about the sort of off-field disruption. The fact of the matter is they have changed defence coach, and that is obviously going to bring some teething issues, regardless of what you think about Felix Jones and the quality of him, and Joel Abd and the quality of him. Changing a coach who runs a defensive system is going to bring kinks to any team. It's just that potentially we might have expected them to have been ironed out a little bit quicker, or at least not been so evident against Japan.
I think it's indicative of the moving parts about this team when you having to refresh a squad. And this is maybe unfair, so stop me if it is, but Ollie Slightholme scored 4 tries this autumn. He's let 4 tries. There have been 4 tries scored on his wing. He doesn't defend like this for Northampton Saints, and he is in his first full campaign. Second full campaign if you count the summer tour. Ironically, Steve Borthwick said when he was first picked on the verge of the summer tour, he said that we're really excited. We know that Ollie Slightholme's a fantastic predatory finisher, but we're really excited about where we can bring his defence. And I think he even name-checked Felix Jones as to how he was going to sort of make Slightholme into this seek and destroy blitzer on the edge. And he has the athletic profile and the toughness to be able to do that, but he's clearly learning on the job. And the try scored by Noato Saito, probably gaffed that pronunciation,
no, that was good.
but was very similar, I thought, to Tommaso Allen try that Italy scored in Rome, whereby it's from an England kick, and the first error, which is a pretty terminal error, is that England honeypot around that breakdown, and then so when a side bolt and go rip it across the field and go coast to coast, England's outside backs are narrow, and then they're blitzing sort of from sand. They don't have the foundation. They don't have people sweeping underneath them. That was something that got better and better under Jones. I now worry that Joe Alab hasn't got the foundation, I guess, of knowledge of the intricacies of that blitz to know how to fix it.
And there's a lot of biting in. You know, you can almost forgive that Japanese try. You can almost forgive biting in and people putting shots in, but there's a lot of biting in and people just tackling air.
Yeah.
With this blitz, and it's like if you're catching somebody and you're sort of ending them, and then you're putting them on the floor. Okay, Japan are keeping the ball alive, and they might still score a try, but at least you've gone in, you've identified a man, you've shot in, and you've put a hit in, and you've put someone on the deck who then can't support the next guy. But England at times are just shooting in, and they look a bit at 6s and 7s, and they're sort of tackling space.
It does all start with that spacing though. That's so important. It's sometimes overlooked because it's the guys, it's Slade and it's the wingers that get isolated. But if you watch that try back on the scoring phase,
which you're now doing,
I'm now
right
doing,
now on your laptop,
England have 4 or 5 players on the short side marking nobody. That's going to put you in strife no matter what the defensive system you're playing. But in the blitz, it means that you don't have those players sweeping underneath those outside backs that are making the proactive reads on the edge. And it just shows, right, that if that mistake is happening in the first test of the year and the last test of the year, that's worrying, because it has been absolutely a case with the defence of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back.
And also now you've got no time until the start of the Six Nations to fix it. You'll have a bit of training camp time when they go abroad, but it's not the same as match conditions.
And the first 3 games are Ireland, France, and Scotland, and they're going to give it some air and test that sort of 13 channel. I
wonder just if more generally as well, England lack. I mean, I think we touched on this last week. They lack world-class sort of jackal threats across the board. They have them, but if you look at sort of the best teams in the world, they have guys who can jackal on the wing. There are some fantastic wing jackalers. You know, you look at Darcy Graham, Gabin Villiers, Colby, and Kirtley Arenza can get over the ball as well. You have midfield jackalers. You got back. It's not just you need your 2 flankers jackaling. And I wonder if England are sort of guilty of that as well, because if they were able to slow down the opposition possession better and more frequently, then 4 people marking the blind side, that's only an organisational thing, and then they haven't got the time to react. Whereas if you're slowing down the opposition ball, you have the time to react and you can fold round. But they're not really doing that. I mean, England's best jackler at the minute is probably Ben Earl. And that's Marato. But he's stripped in the tackle a couple of times, didn't he, against Japan? And he's good at that. But yeah, Itoje and Earl, and you wouldn't say that jackling is necessarily either of those 2 super strengths. You look at the back line, who's turning over ball? Maybe Ollie Lawrence on a good day. Luke Cowan-Dickie used to have it in him. Don't see it as much anymore. He still does have it in him, but you're sort of thinking to yourself, are there world-class exponents at defensive breakdowns here for England that isn't just counter-ruck? Don't think so.
It's been a consistent thing that they don't have the capacity to control an opponent's breakdown speed, I think. And that contributes to it.
It does feel like all the positives from Sunday sort of come with caveats, don't they? So like Ollie Lawrence looked great, made loads of post-contact meters, but it's against Japan. Yeah, the scrum was utterly dominant, but it's against Japan, and also a Japan side, to give them some credit, with very few caps in the side.
200 odd in the side, and as Eddie Jones sort of said And he wasn't. It was just matter of fact. He just said, "Look, we haven't got our best hooker, our best 10, our best 15, so we sort of don't have the spine of our side." I think their fullback, who made his debut against England in June, was actually playing university rugby, because that takes precedent over the national side in Japan, which goes to show. And England, it was lose the whole time. However you looked at it.
I said to you this morning, didn't I? They could have won, I don't know, 1,014, and we would still be talking about the same kind of outcomes. But maybe one slight positive, if we can end on a better note, might be what we saw from Finn Smith in those 26 minutes, because he finally got a chance off the bench, and England looked different, didn't they? Will Greenwood sort of written in his column how with Marcus Smith, Marcus Smith is always looking to kind of make the magic happen, whereas Finn Smith's motive is very much get the ball moving fast. And you were particularly enamoured, Charles, with one pass of his, weren't you?
Oh, that pass off the left hand to Roebuck, best. I think it was to Roebuck. Yeah, best pass. Best pass by an England player in the autumn, and it's just so smooth. And that's all of his passing just looks so smooth and relaxed, and he's very at ease with it. It looks like he's taking it's just effortless. And that's it still needs to be accurate with it, but it is, and he is picking the right passes, and it is effortless, and the ball is not spending a lot of time in his hands. He has got beautifully quick hands, but they're accurate, and the ball travels very sharply out of it. It's just what we've seen with Northampton. The ball fizzes out of his hands accurately, and he is able to bring other players into the game. Marcus Smith, as we said last week, Marcus Smith surely still has a role with England. It just is it at fly half? Is it at fullback? Is it at fly half? Is he too much of a individual talent to get 6 other blokes running smoothly around him? Perhaps. That's not to criticise him. That's just his skills. And his skills might not be suited to playing fly half in a Test rugby team. He might be better at fullback. He looked really good at fullback at times in across the autumn when he's got a bit more space, a bit more time on the outside when England have managed to get him out there.
Yeah, and that connection he can give to that 10 is really good. Furbank does it as well. The best way I've seen this described is actually Dan Bigger did a video for the Rugby Pod where he spoke about Marcus Smith as a disconnected 10. So a 10 that isn't necessarily connected to those forward pods, and what that lends itself to, or what it really needs, is a dominant playmaker at scrum half. And I think so that is why I think actually that probably will work a lot better with Mitchell, and did work very well with Mitchell in New Zealand. What we saw immediately as soon as Finn Smith came on is how connected he is, and how he is speaking to forwards around him in a really clear way, and those structures, because Saints are just famed under Sam Vesti for having this attack which is structure to get out of structure, which means you have those frameworks and those pods, but your goal is to break the line with them, with the decision making within those pods. So the tip passes and the pullbacks, and then going wide off them. What England need to do, I think, undeniably, whoever is at 10 is just to make sure when the time is right to give the ball a little bit of air and get those athletes that they are trying to push through into this team into the game.
And the second best pass of the day, and maybe one of the autumn, was also Finn Smith, but it was Smith to Smith, second half off the right hand to Marcus Smith in the sort of 15 channel first phase, where he went round the outside, and it just looked all lovely, and it looked so smooth and just effortless, and it looked cohesive and it looked collective. And I know it's Japan, but they can only play what's in front of them at the end of the day, and it looked smooth, it looked cohesive. And I would. Can
I give you 2 more passes?
Yeah.
Will Stewart to
Will Stewart. That was
a
gorgeous one.
And Tommy Freeman back inside.
I
was
going to say we shouldn't forget the Tommy Freeman pass. We'll chat a bit more England in the questions, I think, but I'm desperate to hear Charles's fresh take on Scotland against Australia at Murrayfield. So let's do that next.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. As a proud sponsor of the WRU, we believe in the importance of grassroots rugby. That begins with the people who are going the extra mile for their local clubs, on and off the pitch. That's why we're partnering with the Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign. From volunteers to groundsmen, referees to coaches, we want to celebrate the people who are really making a difference and reward them with £5,000 for their club to improve the grassroots game. If you know someone who deserves to be rewarded, we want to hear from you. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to find out more.
Okay, Charles, firstly, what time did you wake up to go to Murrayfield?
I woke up at 5 a.m. on Sunday morning.
And what time did you get to bed when you got back from Murrayfield?
2 a.m. this morning.
What a day. And so you had a lot of time to reflect on Scotland against Australia. So let's see your thoughts.
My thoughts are that I think Gregor Townsend and Sione Tuipulotu in the post-match press conference were far more realistic than many Scotland fans who I spoke to afterwards or I've seen on social media. Sione Tuipulotu said it was a 6 or 7 out of 10 performance, which is something that I completely agree with, and I actually wrote that in my initial report that was on the website on the final whistle. I didn't think Scotland were necessarily amazing, and yet the good thing for them is the real fillip, the real positive is that they beat Australia comfortably in the end. The result was really never in question from the Duhan van der Merwe try just after half time, gave them daylight, and then as soon as Josh Bayliss scored, what a finish from the Bath back rower, as soon as he scored, the result was never in doubt. I thought that Australia were really poor. Joe Schmidt said afterwards that they were very good, and I can't agree with that. I can't get on board with that. I know they had a lot of disruption. Some of their players on Saturday morning saw snow in the flesh for the first time.
I saw, and they were very excited.
Yeah, very excited. And I know they had a lot of disruption. They had their starting hooker, one of their starting locks, drop out within 24 hours of kickoff. Karevi banned, Taniela Tupou injured, and Joseph-Aukuso went off injured early in the game. So they did have a lot of disruption, and Scotland defended very, very well and harried them. But I thought it was a bit of a step backwards from Australia from what we'd seen over the past fortnight. With the Lions ahead, I think they need a really big performance in Dublin this weekend.
I think the positivity around Scotland sort of comes from the fact that they're so used to sort of playing well, having winning positions, and then not getting over the line, isn't it? So it's almost a reaction to what's gone on before. Yeah, for the negativity before, rather than them playing exceptionally.
The irony is it was almost the opposite of that. Really, I thought they were decent, they were solid. It wasn't like they played poorly in the first half. They were sloppy off first phase, and some of their set piece was sloppy. But they were solid. They were decent. Very little to criticise them for, but they weren't the sort of necessarily the Scotland that we know and love, and yet they've won, which is the most important thing, and they've won quite comfortably. You know, Tuipulotu was quite quiet, did the nuts and bolts really well, but there was nothing that fancy. So too Finn Russell. Pierre Schoeman was fantastic, must be approaching World 15 status. But as I said, as Townsend said afterwards, he said that actually South Africa was our best performance of the autumn still, even though we beat Australia. We lost by, 17 points to South Africa, and Townsend was adamant that remains their best performance of the autumn.
I think I would agree with him on that, because I was there for that one, and it was such a strange performance in terms of they basically did everything right and then just didn't have the scrum at the end to compete and to finish the game off, and they also struggled to break down South Africa's defence, which is why I guess maybe the Australia game should get a bit more credit in terms of the tries they scored. I mean, the Josh Bayliss finish, like you've mentioned, was sensational, and then you had Duhan van der Merwe cutting through to set up a try for, was that Finn Russell's try? I think where
I mean, the tries were very stylish, but as I said, I just don't think they actually needed to do that much to score them. Australia missed 30 tackles. And if you're over 30 tackles, and if you're a tier 1 side in a test missing over 30 tackles, you can't turn around and say that you've played well. And with Scotland, with the threats that they have, ball carrying, they're not going to need a second invitation to exploit 30 missed tackles.
You've both been in presses with Sione Tuipulotu this autumn. Do you get the feeling that he's quite a good choice as captain because he's got a sense of he just seems to exude a self-belief, and I've seen some quotes where he sort of said, we knew we were better than Australia, and it was about sort of putting that into practice, and that is great. That's a great outlook to have if that's spreading throughout the team.
I would completely agree with that. He looks really mature. He slipped into that role really easily. I think, obviously, the Six Nations means so much, and there's so much riding on the Six Nations. I think if Scotland go really well and Ireland falter a little bit, then Tuipulotu's an outside shout for Lions captain, I think. I mean, he's a candidate no matter what, because he's one of the 4 home nations captains. The little bee in my bonnet I have about this is that Gregor Townsend was asked, maybe by me, whether... So I asked Gregor Townsend whether Tuipulotu could captain the Lions, and he was like, we'll see, but he's going in that direction. Then somebody else asked whether Tuipulotu would be captain for the autumn. Sorry, for the Six Nations after the autumn, for the Six Nations after the autumn, and Gregor sort of wouldn't be wasn't really drawn on it, and he wouldn't sort of say yes because we've got this great leadership group. And I was sort of there going, surely you want that continuity. Like, can you ever imagine?
Can you take the Six Nations off after being named after being named Lions captain?
Yeah. Can you imagine Clive Woodward ever saying that, like Martin Johnson? Oh yeah, we'll reassess the leadership group after this autumn and see if Jono's going to lead us in the Six Nations, or even not just Martin Johnson. Brian O'Driscoll, Paul O'Connell, that sort of thing. Sam Warburton, Alan Wynne-Jones.
It just feels like he's trying to avoid further scrutiny, doesn't it, by keeping his options open?
It does, but it's clearly gone so well.
It was Finn, wasn't it?
It was Finn, and it's gone so well, and clearly he's a really respected, popular player. And I was just sort of like, oh, Gregor, just say it's going to be him, and just build around him. He's one of the first names on the team sheet, and just give it to him.
From a journalist point of view, he just gives us wicked narrative going back to Australia that he has lent into himself, saying he's got unfinished business, and also his little set to with both the Aussie senses. I think.
That was after the Sua'ali'i hit on him, wasn't it? Which I then trigger.
It was a bit venomous.
It was mouth guard, and then led to him going off. Was that why he went off?
Shoulder done.
Was it Stinger?
Okay. That was a bit venomous. There was a bit of venom in that. So there was a massive collision between Tuipulotu and Sua'ali'i. They both sort of pinball ricocheted off each other. Sua'ali'i just stayed down, holding his shoulder the whole time, and then Tuipulotu got up and walked over and given him a bit of the what for, giving him a bit of jip. Sua'ali'i has not enjoyed it at all.
Right.
And then there's a bit of a coming together. And then in the end, I'm sure I heard on the ref mic Sua'ali'i saying, I'll get you next time, mate, to Tuipulotu.
And then
which might be the Lions. Who knows? Yeah. And then he had to trudge off, and Duhan van der Merwe gave him a bit of the old tears and tapped his shoulder and everything as he went off. So there was that was right in front of the press box.
This is great.
Great pantomime.
We don't want like plucky Scotland. We want spicy Scotland.
No, exactly.
Which just leads me to a final question on this before we talk about the other games. Have you seen enough Charles and Charlie and me to think that Scotland?
To ask myself.
I just don't want to exclude myself.
Yes,
to think that Scotland can close that gap with France and Ireland in the Six Nations and genuinely for this time be title contenders?
I think to a lesser extent, I'm going to slightly dodge the question here, but offer something that I think is vaguely insightful. I think maybe to a lesser extent, maybe to a 50% less, yesterday's Scotland match was almost the same as England's in that we didn't actually learn that much about them. I think, because Australia was so poor, I don't think actually the question marks that surrounded Scotland were answered yesterday. They played very well. They were completely deserving of their victory. But I think the key questions, a bit like with England, we didn't learn whether the things that have dogged them, their Achilles heels, have been solved. And I think it is literally all eyes on the Six Nations. To that end, I will sort of answer your question by saying they certainly have the potential to become contenders. Do they have the squad? Do they have the depth? Do they have the bench? That is the issue. They need to get some bodies back, I think, for that bench.
Those two, they're just looking at their fixtures rounds 2 and 3, Ireland at home, England away. It does feel, I felt really cocky before the autumn about England because I was saying, well, whatever happens, guys, we're going to learn something new about this England team, and we just haven't really. It's just sort of they've treaded water and they're still lapsing late, and good enough to beat Japan, but. Yeah, I hope that's the case. I think it's going to be a really special Six Nations, actually, because it's so unpredictable.
What I'm taking from Charles's report is that if the Lions can just present Australia with some snow and just kind of throw them off next summer, then it's a series 3-0 clean sweep. So
what I would say is I love the sledging, like the sledging to set up series, but you've got to make sure you're picked as well.
Do not say
I'll see you next time.
That is a factor.
If you get picked,
do not eat green and gold snow.
Absolutely do not do that. Let's chat about Wales 12, South Africa 45. I was there. What would you like to know, either of you?
Was it better than expected?
Yes,
almost.
Yes, and that in a way is the greatest tragedy of the lot, because everybody at the end was walking around going, could have been worse. We've only lost by whatever we've lost by, like that. Everyone was kind of. Because the start was so bad, wasn't it? Like 2 tries for both locks inside 8 minutes. I think everybody sort of went, oh, there we go. And Wales did stick in there. Rassie Erasmus was full of praise afterwards for how well they had kind of not let the game completely get away and how they battled. And there were flashes of individual quality from James Botham with a couple of try savers. Blair Murray had one as well. Jack Morgan can't stop tackling. He probably still is right now somewhere, just trying to up his tally from the last week. Darby Lake just tries so hard and is a really promising player and a potential lion maybe, but Wales, I think the worst bit for Wales for me was when they had a 5 metre attacking line out and Lake just sailed it over everybody and South Africa got off lightly and that was, if that's the worst moment, that's forgetting how the scrum was just utterly destroyed. Poor Archie Griffin.
Poor old Archie Griffin.
Hard. Yeah, a tough day for Wales, but not as bad as it could have been.
Can we throw Nicky Smith in the sort of the upsides for Wales?
Yeah,
he was pretty good.
Yeah, he stayed on for far longer than I was expecting as well.
Scrum.
He was kind of on until like 70 odd minutes and has had a good season. For
I have picked a Lions squad this morning, which is on the Telegraph Sport website, and Nicky Smith is one of the 3 loose heads. You'll both be glad to hear.
See, that's quite a good tease for the rest of the squad.
I've got a question for you.
Hi.
What happened between Monday and Tuesday to sort of flip the narrative of
Craig
Gatland's
David.
got to go to actually we might as well keep him because there's nobody else? Was it Rassie Erasmus saying lay off Warren Gatland on the Tuesday?
I maybe that played into it. I almost wonder whether it was just a realisation that this issue is bigger to an extent than just Warren himself. And I think what was interesting about the mood was that Sunday, the Australia game was like real rage and disappointment from everybody as a collective, whereas because everybody knew that they were going to lose by 30 points. Actually, the mood was a lot softer. Gatland spoke a lot more positively about the effort that he saw from the players. He was almost kind of saying, right, I've seen something here that we can actually build around and work around moving forward, even though we've lost by loads of points. And it's just such a raw Wales team.
Well, he made it rawer.
Yes, yeah, almost he doubled down. But because I think he just realised that even if he picked the strongest players available, they were going to lose anyway. So
would it have been more sort of disheartening?
Yeah, it would have been, because if your best team is out there and struggles, that's even worse, isn't it? One point he made in the post-match press conference, and he's used these quite well over the last few weeks to make his points. He's spoken a lot about conditioning, hasn't he, the last 2 weeks, how Wales need to get fitter. There is an element of truth to that because you are seeing them, they look a different side in World Cups when they have these pre-World Cup intense training camps to how they look in Six Nations in the autumn. They don't look as the same kind of fitness side in terms of effort. The other thing he mentioned was that the closing of the National Academy in Wales in 2015 has sort of led to this rebound effect of producing poor under-20 sides, and now you're getting those under-20 sides producing the players who are now in the test sides, and there's a lack of quality there, which Wales didn't have when the National Academy was in place. So I'm sure that has been a huge part of Sunday's WRU AGM discussions, and it will be something that Gatland will be pushing hard. Any more thoughts from either of you?
I'm not convinced by that, to be honest.
Because you think there is a good crop of young players here.
Well, I just think that Warren Gatland has been in charge between 2015 and I think is he taking responsibility for those broken bits of the pathway too?
I think that the way he expressed it was that there is a sort of a collective failure there, as in maybe he needed to be stronger on that and to insist that they have the right structures in place. Yeah, I don't think it's purely him saying it's not my fault.
Yeah.
But I mean, the team that was out there on Saturday was rough against the South Africa team who were able to make loads of changes and still look great.
They're on a different plane as far as the virtuous circle of them having these iconic back-to-back World Cup winners and then being able to bring in players. And now they've got players maybe who have just won the one World Cup who are pushing and getting better and coming to us. I'm thinking someone like Curtly Arenza was probably the best player.
Well, listen, quietly, they've had a sensational year, haven't they? Because they've managed to pick 51 players. They've had, and Rassie said afterwards, they've had 60 players sort of in training throughout the year. They've won 11 out of 13. They lost in Argentina, but that was a heavily changed side, and it was almost to just give guys a cap. And the Ireland game at home, Ireland play fantastic, and they lose to a last-minute drop goal. They've won the Rugby Championship. They've beaten New Zealand twice at home. They've gone unbeaten in the autumn for the first time since 2013. I think as kind of year one of a post-World Cup rebuild goes, after winning the World Cup, it's almost been perfect.
Peaking too soon?
No, that's the worrying thing. I don't think they are, as in worrying for everybody else in the world. I don't think they are. I think the plan is so cleverly in place. You've got kind of agent Jack Nienaber working away in Ireland to then come back in, 2026 to pass on what he's learned, and who knows who else, whether they'll tap up other expertise elsewhere. No, I think it's a a dauntingly well-run project for all the other nations in the world, and that's quite scary.
I'd really like them to have played France this autumn.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's true.
When is that rematch going to happen? Probably next autumn.
That'll be
at the earliest.
Very spicy. What's French for spicy, Charles?
Épicier.
Sorry, what was that?
Épicier.
I was so quiet. I wasn't sure if you knew. Very finally, a quick word on Ireland, Fiji. I think you had eyes on this closest, Charles, would I say?
Yeah. I know. I absolutely watched it. Fiji were a mess. In all honesty, Fiji were a mess. Really disappointing. After how they went against Wales, they're a bit of a mess, and a bit like Scotland against Australia. We didn't really learn that much about Ireland. Ireland didn't really have to get out of third gear to beat them. They demolished them at the scrum.
What happened with Prendergast at fly half and his yellow card? I saw there was a bit of discussion afterwards about whether that would have been a stronger punishment if he was wearing a different coloured shirt, as Mick Byrne, the Fiji coach, put it.
Right, that.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. I don't know about that. They do seem to be a sort of the tier 2 nations. I don't know how much unconscious bias there is. I always assumed that referees would offer unconscious bias the other way, i.e. aid the underdog. If you were going to be unconsciously biased towards a side, you might aid the underdog. So I don't know if there's any unconscious bias. Certainly it was borderline, and Prendergast was probably lucky. It was good to see him go a full 80 though at fly half at the Aviva. He's obviously got tons and tons of promise. And it was a shame that Jamie Osborne left early, but I like Jacob Stockdale back. He's been in great form for Ulster. Him and Matt Hansen just really, without James Lowe, they've got two really good wingers there. And Josh van der Fleer looks like he's back to his sort of old self. Not that he really went too far off the boil, but I think there were sort of some question marks about his form last year, and he's looking really good. And that game against and Gus McCarthy at hooker, wasn't even really in the initial squad, and who came in because Andy Farrell said that sometimes people come into the squad and come training and they just sort of force your hand by how impressive they've been. He went the full 80 and looked really good. So they really do have a conveyor belt at hooker with Dan Sheehan to come back after that ACL. They're building depth. They're starting 15 against Australia next week. It'll be interesting to see what Farrell picks, and it'll be interesting to see how they go.
Matt Hansen, another potential Lion going back to Australia, which is quite cool.
Yes.
That'd be cool storyline.
And just very, very finally, a quick line on France, Argentina. It got a bit out of hand because France were up 30-39 at the break.
Yeah.
Been an interesting autumn for crop rolls, or not quite crop rolls.
Yeah, real soft one.
A real
Julian Montoya gets
decision,
a yellow card, and the only relief with that was that it wasn't upgraded, because there was no way it should have been upgraded. But I was sort of thinking, please don't upgrade this. And also an interesting decision with Juan Martín González and whether he deliberately palmed the ball forward or backwards when he was trying to stop the BRA
opposite corner
try.
to Etzebeth's one in the World Cup quarter-final, and very close.
I mean, just on that, I think the ball does go backwards. The officials seem to suggest it was a deliberate slap out because of the direction of Juan Martín González's palm. But I think if you're trying to regather the ball, your palm is always going to be facing that way.
Yeah.
And I think it was a really tricky one and a really unique situation. So I don't think necessarily it was a right or wrong call. I just think maybe a little bit more empathy and context was required, because the ball did go backwards. That is facts. You can see where it touched his hand and where it finished is travelling backwards. But I think the officials decided that because his palm was facing the other way, the initial, a bit like the direction out the hands with forward passes, the initial sort of contact, or the initial effort, if you like, was to knock it forwards or towards touch.
Yeah,
I think
Argentina less susceptible to the brain explosions because they stuck in that when they could have really...
as they did against Ireland. The previous week. I've lost all track.
It was in November.
It was a similar thing where got in a big hole, dug their way out of it, and the BRA try was fantastic.
Just the scrum is a perennial issue for them, isn't it? It's almost got to the point now where
for Argentina.
Yeah, for Argentina. Yeah. I mean, even before the game. Felipe Contepomi said, we don't want scrums. We just don't want that many scrums. And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that.
You might need to work on that moving forward. Right, that's all the games recapped. Let's get into your final questions of the autumn. Okay, a quick roundup of the World Rugby Awards, which took place in Monaco on Sunday. I'll admit that completely passed me by while I was at Twickenham that those were taking place. But to recap... Oh, sorry, Charlie.
No, I was just going to say, me too. And it was Charles's... you saying that du Toit had got it over Etzebeth. I didn't know what you were talking about for a little bit.
a line out.
No change there.
or something. So Pieter-Steph du Toit, Player of the Year. I thought it was pretty tight with Eben Etzebeth, but I can't really complain.
No.
Either way, have either of you got a soapbox to stand on there? Or...
No, I mean, I thought it would be Etzebeth. I thought it should be Etzebeth, but I'm not really that fussed about it. I mean, I'm not really fussed about any of them, to be honest. I think they're all a little bit of an odd fabrication, but hey-ho. Let's move on.
You have to have something, don't you? I mean, Antoine Dupont winning Sevens Player of the Year is quite funny.
Who else could have got it?
I mean, yeah, it's funny. Maybe that was just to rile up South Africans, just for a laugh. Ellie Kildun winning Women's Player of the Year feels like an absolute no-brainer because she's been sensational. Wallace Satiti winning Men's Breakthrough Player of the Year. So an interesting quote from Dan Carter, I think, on the For Love of Rugby podcast, where he said that Satiti is probably future All Blacks captain in the making, which is quite a nice kind of crown to put on him. But I also can't argue otherwise. It was him. I think the main competition there was probably Sasha Feinberg and Ngoma Zulu, who sadly we haven't seen this autumn, but Satiti's been wicked, hasn't he?
Really good.
He has, and he's got that. He in the sort of mix zone after New Zealand played and beat England. He's got a very calm manner about him, which might be what Dan Carter's thinking of there. But on just as far as his content in games, he is some player.
Is that the classic kind of more mature than his age? Because what is he, 22 sort of thing? And there was also a men's World 15 named, which we will go through just to kind of see if we have any major arguments. So Will Jordan at fullback, Cheslin Colby on one wing, Jesse Creel and Damien Dearlindy in your centres, James Lowe on the other wing, Damien McKenzie and Jameson Gibson-Park your halfbacks, your front row, Oxenche, Malcolm Marks, Tyrell Lomax of New Zealand, Eben Etzebeth and Ty Byrne are your locks, and then Pablo Matera, Pieter-Steph du Toit, and Caelan Doris in your back row. Any kind of massive quibbles you have there? The Pablo Matera one's interesting for me, only because strong case for Juan Martín Gonzalez, his compatriot, to be in there.
And on current, if I mean, this is a World 15 that takes in the entire last calendar year, so. But if you're going on current form, then I think Wallace Atiti gets in at 6, doesn't he? As we've just said, and then Tom Wright at fullback has been sensational in the autumn. I think Tamaiti Williams at loosehead is probably the best loosehead in the world at the minute, and probably Antoine Dupont at 7 out of 10 during the autumn gets in above Jamison Gibson-Park.
Yeah.
Are you happy with 7 Springboks for Ireland players when Ireland nicked a test over there?
I think so, just because of what they've done overall as a body of work.
Also, I think that is anybody picking a World 15 at the minute that doesn't have Damien Penaud and Louis Bielbiere in it?
Well, you could make an argument for Bielbiere over James Lowe. So do it now. I mean,
argument made.
Okay, yeah, very good. I wonder about Damien McKenzie at fly half, but also I'm trying to think who.
I mean, Ramos throughout the autumn looked excellent at fly half, and he's not even a fly half. So and Bone Barrett is excellent at 10.
This is where we scan through the fly halves
Finn Smith,
of the world.
Finn Smith, get him in.
Finn Smith in the world 15.
Get him
Great. Okay. I mean, off 26 minutes in the autumn.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Respect your argument. Okay, so that's your team of the year. Let's get into your questions now. First one is from Harry on Blue Sky, which we're now all on because we're just covering all bases, aren't we, really, to see what takes off and what survives. He asks, has George Ford played his last game for England?
Yikes. No, I don't think so. I think he comes in, whether it's from the bench or... You can't forget how good he was in the Six Nations. People are forgetting how good he was in the Six Nations, especially
and World Cup.
Yeah, but this year's Six Nations,
well, yeah.
against Ireland and against France particularly, he was phenomenal. And I'm sure that Borthwick would have wanted him to go on the New Zealand tour to play the role that Bowden Barrett ended up playing for the All Blacks. He obviously had that pretty nightmarish cameo against the All Blacks at Twickenham, which I think has kind of stuck in people's minds. But I think when we were talking about connected fly halves earlier and maybe how they might help bring more out of this England attack that has so many moving parts, I think he still has a role to play. Certainly, he's got a central contract. He was running the tee yesterday, so he's clearly a very important part of the setup. It is going to be interesting how they manage those three fly halves, and it is going to be tricky, and it is going to throw up some awkward scenarios, I'm sure. But I can't imagine he has played his last game from him.
No, me neither. Ian would like to know, was Joel Abd really the best defence coach available, or was it jobs for the boys? Charles?
I don't think it would have been jobs for the boys, but there is an element of where do you draw the line with jobs for the boys? Because obviously Borthwick, after what happened with Felix Jones, would want somebody in who he trusts.
Someone who he had never met before, I guess.
And then left him in the lurch a little bit, would want someone in who he might have been a little bit scarred by that, and would want someone in who he would trust. Clearly he trusts Joel Abd. He respects him as a rugby thinker and a rugby mind. They go way back. Should point out as well that Joel Abd wasn't actually available.
Of course. It's a weird job share, isn't it?
At the end of the season, he is going full time with England after leaving Oyonnax behind, who are currently 14th in the French second division out of 16. So Joel Abd may be spreading himself a little bit thin. But in terms of available options, there couldn't have been many at all. The two who it came down to, as we understand it, is Joel Abd and Paul Gustard, and neither of whom were available, in inverted commas. They're both under contract.
Yeah. I think the argument there is if you're picking from who's available, the pool is quite small. I wonder if there's a bigger conversation to be had there. I think people look at what England have in terms of resource and in terms of player pool, and they often question whether the very, very best coaches are being appointed. And that is a whole different conversation, which we haven't quite got time for now.
No, but I suppose just very quickly, I think if you've got a set amount of money for a defence coach,
yes,
Felix Jones is still on the books, so you've basically got two defence. You've got that money, even if it is a substantial amount of money, it's still being split between two people. So they've got that sort of hands tied a little bit here, the RFU. So they had to appoint somebody. Maybe there's a reason why Joel Abd is on a part-time basis, because they're still paying Felix Jones. Felix Jones is still an employee of the RFU.
Yeah. Adam wants to know, is the lack of depth at 12 more of an issue than other positions? That's an interesting question in terms of where do England have the worst depth at the moment?
Well, I think if we start this with a positive, I think they've made strides to address depth issues at 6 in the wake of Courtney Lawes retiring from international rugby. So they've moved Chesham there, and in the absence of Chesham, they brought through Chandler Cunningham South, which is quite admirable. At 3, it was very interesting because we were expecting Sua'ali'i to sort of be a loose head on England duty. So it was interesting that he was deployed as a tight head. Afo for Sogbon is a coming force, and it was interesting that Joe Hayes started and went well for England at 8. So with those two out of the way, I still think 12 is tricky. They're waiting for Max Ajomo to put some games together. They keep naming him in squads when he's unavailable and injured. Fraser Dingwall was, as I think I said last week, was impressive for England A. If he played for the senior team with Lawrence, I think he'd defend at 13 and attack at 12 and stand at first receiver and play those sort of and be the decision maker there. Otherwise, there are players there. So
you had Joe Woodward's looked really good for Leicester at 12, and
Ollie Hartley's just come back from long-term injury. Zach Wimbush is maybe more of a 13, but is an exciting,
has size, doesn't he? Wimbush
is a really interesting athlete.
Yeah.
Probably missing players there. Sam Spink is more of a 13, I think, but Mark McCall is very excited about that partnership with Hartley at Saracens. I just think with 12, it's this. They could have capped Nick Tompkins. They could have capped Cameron Redpath, and I wonder whether there was just, and it's not just Steve Borthwick. In fact, it's probably not his issue. It's more that Eddie Jones and previous coaches have been fixated about this idea of what is test quality, and that's why Owen Farrell was there for such a long time, because they felt that they needed to get those attributes on the pitch, regardless of what number Owen Farrell was playing. But it's very interesting. Yeah, a lot of our readers are convinced that there needs to be a change in the pathway where they look at converting some of the back rowers coming through. Because if you think about it, in 2015, everybody was going, "Where are the sevens?"
Yeah,
millions of them now.
Yeah,
so maybe.
How many minutes has Ben had in midfield? Was that just the end of the All
Blacks
game?
That's how they are trying to fudge it. Is with Ben Earls kind of standing at 12 a fair bit in sort of from set moves. So
Ireland had Doris at 12 as well for a set move on that.
That's quite interesting. Jim would like to know: do TMOs come in too often? Now jumping from missed knock-ons, do we want perfection or speed of game? So that's an interesting question. Having watched France and Argentina on Friday night, which was refereed by Luke Pearce, and he's kind of refereed at not quite a million miles an hour, but he doesn't like to hang around between decisions, and if stuff doesn't have to be referred, he won't refer it, and actually that makes for quite an enjoyable spectacle. Charles, you're primed to answer this.
Well, I've written about this a lot. We're never going to get perfection. Impossible, doesn't exist, abstract concept. So yes, I do think they come in too often because we're not going to get perfection. So what are we saying? Are we saying that we want to try and get as close to perfection as possible while damaging the spectacle and the the enjoyment of the viewership? Or are we saying that we want the TMO to get, or are we saying that we could rein in the TMO a little bit and have it just for acts of foul play, 20-minute reds, tackles, acts of foul play, croc rolls, and try scoring opportunities, i.e. in the act of scoring, not 2 or 3 phases before. I'm talking in the act of scoring, and foul play only would be what I would be an advocate for.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting solution. Angus wants to know, we've spoken about Sua'ali'i Tuipulotu as a possible outsider for Lions captain. If you were picking a Lions captain right now, Charles, who would you go for? Doris feels like the front runner and the obvious pick, and it's probably where I would go. But I do really rate Darry Lake and how he's leading this young Wales side and what he offers. Charles, you first.
Yeah, I'm not against Darry Lake. I think he shouldn't be.
I don't know if he's a starter.
Well, it depends, I suppose, on how Sheehan goes when he comes back. But Ewan Ashman's looked really good as well. I think Darry Lake should not be sidelined and marginalised just because of the state of Wales at the minute. I think he's an excellent player. The feedback that you get from coaches and players about his captaincy is immensely positive. Doris is the front runner, definitely. I would say, yeah, Doris is definitely the front runner, and it's his to lose, I think. But there are other candidates. There are, as I said, Sua'ali'i Tuipulotu, if he has another really good captaincy, Six Nations and Scotland go well, he's a dark horse.
Charlie, what about you?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think he's one of the first names on the plane, Sua'ali'i Tuipulotu, because I just think he can play in both centre positions, can't he? He's just the kind of guy that knits together a back line so well with his distribution and his carrying. And I love that. I'm a sucker for that storyline. Anybody from England? How about Maro Toji as a wild card, or is his? I don't think his place is necessarily secure in the starting side.
Owen Farrell. Met with silence
for a captain.
I'm not ready for the discourse.
I was too busy double checking who was the last Scottish Lions captain, and it was Gavin Hastings in '93. I just wanted to make sure because that would be be quite nice to have a Lions captain.
It's interesting. Well, didn't they? There was an '89 was Finlay Calder as well. So.
You had Finlay Calder before.
Nobody's proposing Jamie George. It's quite interesting.
No.
I think that's only because I'm not convinced in this moment that he will necessarily go. Like he might go and be midweek captain kind of role, but I don't necessarily know if he's my starter.
There's a world where only this is it crazy to suggest that there might only be less than a handful of England Lions.
I'm just trying to think now how many I had on that squad that I've picked.
I was
going to
say
this
this is the perfect chance to plug that Charles has written a Lions squad.
I don't think that's crazy whatsoever.
Okay, so I don't have an English hooker. I don't have any English props. I have Maro Toji and George Martin. involved. I have Ben Earl involved. I do have Jack Willis as a bit of a wild card. None of the English nines. I've got Marcus Smith in there. Emmanuel Feiwa-Boso, and that's it.
Did you have Owen Farrell? Sorry,
I did not have Owen Farrell.
Okay.
Because he's injured at the minute. So this was if they were to tour tomorrow.
Right now.
So
okay.
I'm not saying that he would be in, but I managed to get out of jail quite easily by saying that he is injured at the minute.
I quite love the logistical chaos if they had to go on tour tomorrow. Right, lads, can you pack? Can we organise travel? Can we get everything ready? Can we do
a jailbreak?
Can we do a press conference with the captain? The absolute madness. Yeah, so sorry. So you were leaning. What was your answer? Sorry,
my. I think it would be Doris.
Yeah.
I think Tuipulotu is coming up on the rails. I just wonder whether Maritoji might be in with a shout just to throw another name.
I'd love to see him in at least in the. I mean, he's going to be. He still would be a certain starter, right? I think.
I don't know.
I don't think
there are any.
He's been such a reliable lion over the last two.
But you look at James Ryan, Joe McCarthy, Ty Byrne can also play in the row. George Martin.
I'd love to get Adam Beard on the plane. I just think Adam Beard's so good at running a line out and disrupting.
I think second row is probably one of the plus points for Wales with Adam Beard, Will Rowlands, and Daffy Jenkins to come back, who was excellent for them during the Six Nations. I think that actually locks not an area of concern for Wales.
Nice problem to have. Yeah. Final question from Elliot, who asks, "What was the best press box scran of the Autumn Internationals?" I do appreciate this question, Charlie. What?
Well, I've gone Twickenham, haven't I, throughout? So yeah, that was.
So it'd be great if you said somewhere else.
The Stoop for the England Day game. You get a voucher to take you behind the curtain, which you're also interested in, I'm sure. That you get a voucher, and there is. I was actually caught trying to find this duck van that Charles you told me about.
Does exist?
I couldn't find.
Hang on, a duck van.
Charles, what do you tell me about it?
Yeah. There is at the Stoop on match days near the media centre. There is a pulled duck burger van.
This is at Harlequins.
This is at Harlequins.
Of course it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. With raclette cheese and an onion jam, and it was utterly delicious in a brioche bun, and it was delicious.
The producers behind the glass are literally shaking their heads at you discussing this.
Well, I tried to find it and couldn't find it, so actually had a Cornish pasty for the England Day game.
Hey, that's great.
Did the job.
So Cornish pasty was your best scran of the.
No, there was some lovely chicken at Twickenham yesterday.
Well, to go back to Elliot's question, I think Twickenham does generally win on the whole. However, at Murrayfield yesterday it was lovely, and you would think that the Stade de France would nail it. All the French clubs nail it. The Stade de France is the worst of all of the Six Nations.
Wow.
You get sort of a sandwich.
Yeah.
A packeted meal deal sandwich, which don't even really exist as a concept in France, so it's really odd. And some water and some crisps.
You feel at home.
And it's literally, yeah, exactly. Look, it's fine. I'm not complaining, but if you had to rank them, Stade de France, Paris would be bottom.
Sounds
but
like
all the French club grounds are sensational.
Can we abort so we don't spend more time on this than we did on the Lions captaincy?
No, this is an important topic.
It is a serious podcast.
Only because I want to give been a tough autumn for Wales, but Saturday's food was lovely. Nice beef stew, and they're getting some things right.
And the Aviva's good too.
The Aviva's good too. And
Murrayfield was good yesterday. Good lamb, couscous.
Okay. I think that's grand.
There you go, Elliot.
There you go. I hope that is comprehensive.
Elliot, I really hope that was the answer you wanted.
I hope you've lasted this long, Elliot.
We didn't go to Rome this autumn, but it's also excellent there.
If anyone is still listening, well done. Right, that's it for today. Until the new year. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jeremy, and producers behind the glass. Thank you, everybody, for listening as well. Still going to be mopping up lots of stuff from the autumn over the next few days, so keep an eye on the website there. Look out for Charles's Lions squad as well, and also for Ireland, Australia this weekend. We can't forget about that, can we? So there's going to be a short break now until the Six Nations, but I promise that we will be back with many, many episodes throughout that tournament as well. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. At Go.compare, we are pleased to be partnering with the Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign, recognising the individuals who are going the extra mile at grassroots rugby clubs across Great Britain. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to nominate a grassroots hero who could win £5,000 for their club, as well as hints and tips from our insurance experts at Go.compare.